All right, let's get right into it. If you've ever heard of visual snow syndrome, you know it's so much more than just seeing a little static. It's this persistent and honestly, often debilitating neurological condition. It's like the brain's internal volume knob has been cranked to 11 and just stuck there. But what if the way forward isn't about trying to get rid of the static, but about teaching the brain how to work with it differently? This question, it really hits home for so many people dealing with VSS. When every single visual experience is an overload, what's the natural response? You retreat, right? You pull back from grocery stores, from driving, from just looking at a screen, and bit by bit, your world can feel like it's just closing in on you. So, we're going to break down why that happens, and way more importantly, how to start reversing it. So, what is actually going on here at the core? Well, the fancy term is thalamocortical dysrhythmia. Yeah, I know. But a much better way to think about it is as a high gain brain. Seriously, imagine an amplifier with the gain dial turned all the way up. It doesn't just make the music louder, right? It introduces a ton of buzzing, hissing, and distortion. That is exactly what's happening in the brain. The sensory processing is so amplified that it creates its own internal static. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with what a high gain brain is actually doing. Then we'll map out the vicious cycle it traps you in. We'll look at how our vision systems start to fail. And then, and this is the hopeful part, we're going to talk about reverse engineering the brain, recalibrating your senses, and finally, taking back your world. Okay, first up, let's talk about the foundational problem. When your brain is just constantly swimming in this noisy, messy visual information, it's got to do something to adapt. The problem is, sometimes that adaptation makes everything so much worse. And this adaptation is called a sensory pivot. Now get this, because it's completely counterintuitive. Your visual system is the one sending all the corrupted noisy data. But instead of the brain learning to ignore it, it doubles down. It actually starts to over-rely on your vision, clinging to that faulty signal like it's the only reliable source of information it has. And that sensory pivot doesn't just stay inside your head. Nope. It triggers this cascade of real-world behaviors that builds this powerful, self-reinforcing trap. Let's take a look at how this vicious cycle actually works. This slide lays out the trap perfectly. It all starts with visual overload. Busy places just become too much. So what do? The natural response is avoidance. But, and here's the absolute kicker, by avoiding those places, you're starving your brain of healthy data, so it turns its internal gain up even higher to scan for potential threats. And of course, that just makes the next time you go out even more overwhelming, which just feeds the cycle of avoidance. It's a brutal loop. This looping trap actually has a name. It's called visual vestibular mismatch, or VVM. This is a state where the signals coming from your eyes just don't match the signals from your inner ear and your body. The brain has no idea how to make sense of that conflict, and it does the only thing it can. It triggers a massive panic response. And we're not just talking about feeling a little dizzy. This is your body's entire fight-or-flight system going on red alert. Okay, to really wrap our heads around this, we need to understand that our vision actually has two totally different jobs. I love this analogy. Think of it as having both an autopilot for stability and a GPS for navigation. In VSS, both of these systems are failing, but in very, very specific ways. Just look at this comparison here. In a healthy brain, your autopilot, your ambient vision, is quiet. It just gives you a stable horizon, you don't even think about it. And your GPS, your focal vision, is sharp and precise. But in VSS, both systems are loud. The autopilot is trying to balance on a signal that's constantly flickering with static. And the GPS is completely overwhelmed by trailing images. That's called palinopsia, making it almost impossible to navigate through a room. So here's the big takeaway. The brain is desperately trying to use a broken tool to fix the problem. It's clinging to that faulty, loud, corrupted visual signal for everything, for stability, for navigation, and the only thing that happens is it creates more instability and makes a person even more intolerant to the world around them. Okay, so that's the problem. It's a complex, self-reinforcing trap. So how in the world do you get out? You can't just tell your brain to stop. You have to literally reverse engineer its bad habits. And this is where we pivot from the problem to the solution. And it is so important to be clear about the goal here. This quote from the source material really just says it perfectly. We are not trying to cure the static. That's a neurological fact of the condition. Instead, the goal is to optimize how the brain processes that static, to teach it new, more functional ways to operate. So, this optimization process, it's called sensory integration therapy. And it's really just a methodical recalibration of the senses, specifically designed to break the brain's unhealthy dependence on its faulty vision. And this is the path forward. It's a three-step process. First, you establish an anchor. You use simple exercises like just standing with your eyes closed. This removes the noisy visual input and forces the brain to start trusting the reliable signals from your body and inner ear again. Second, you introduce conflict. You challenge the brain with unreliable visual data on purpose to teach it to stop relying so heavily on vision. And finally, you break the bad habit. You help the brain get back to using vision for its real job, navigation, instead of using it as this frantic, faulty crutch for stability. So that's the theory. But does this stuff actually work in the real world? Oh yeah. Let's look at a real-world example of what happens when a person's brain gets successfully recalibrated. Get this. A 54-year-old woman literally housebound for 3 years because of her symptoms. After this kind of therapy, she was able to navigate a grocery store again. She could watch TV comfortably. She could handle busy environments without spiraling into panic. I mean, these are not small victories. This is literally getting your life back. This is what functional recovery looks like. And stories like that are so critical because the stakes are incredibly high. For people who don't find a path to functional recovery, the impact is just devastating. Studies show that for over 60% of people with VSS, the condition significantly impacts their ability to work and to have a social life. That number is exactly why this matters so much. It's the clinical way of saying that for most people, that feeling of the world shrinking becomes their reality. That's the real challenge here, this slippery slope of intolerance. If it's left untreated, that vicious cycle we talked about just keeps spinning and a person's world just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And that's what makes this kind of proactive therapy so urgent. And all of this brings us to our final thought. For so long, the focus has been on finding a cure for the static. But what if that's the wrong question entirely? What if the true path to feeling better, to feeling functional, doesn't lie in silencing the noise, but in recalibrating the brain to navigate the world with it? It's a really powerful shift in perspective, and for so many, it's the key to finally turning that volume down and reclaiming their world.